I slid into my husband's car and froze, tucked in the glove compartment, a tube of personal lubricant, used, sticky, betrayal in plastic form. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I just swapped it quietly, coldly, with industrial strength superglue. And what happened next? Our neighbors dialed 911. The fire department rushed in, and my entire life exploded in front of the whole damn neighborhood. If you're watching this, you need to hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you hearing this story of revenge from? Because this truth, it's traveled farther than I ever imagined. I sat alone at the kitchen table, silence so thick it choked me like fog rolling in at dawn, suffocating every memory I once held sacred. That old clock on the wall, my mother's wedding gift, ticked like a judge's gavel. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each tick carved deeper into the lie I'd called a marriage for 40 years. Julian stumbled in late, again another business dinner, he claimed, but his eyes, haunted, hollow, like he'd sold his soul and was drowning in the receipt. He tossed his jacket like it weighed a ton, yanked off his tie like it was strangling him, and collapsed onto the bed without even washing the scent of her off his skin. Yet it's her, because beneath his expensive cologne lingered a sweet, cloying, floral perfume, foreign, intimate, brazen, a signature I didn't recognize, but my gut knew all too well. Minutes later, his snores filled the house, once a lullaby, now a mockery, a lullaby for the fool I'd become. I rose like a ghost, 40 years of love turned to ash in my veins, and began tidying his mess, his wallet, his phone, his laptop. And then, his phone lit up, an email, glowing like a warning flare in the dark. Julian hated Emma, always said, text too complicated, Juliet, I'll just call. So why was there a message right there on his screen, signed with a red heart and 2 chilling words? You were incredible tonight, Dad, Dad. My blood turned to ice. I swiped down, desperate, trembling, searching for answers, only found a jumble of letters, a fake name, a digital mask. A cold wind howled through the cracks of my reality. Something was rotting at the core of my life, and I was just now smelling it. Then his pants pocket, a crisp receipt, fancy steakhouse, San Antonio, tonight, but he told me Dallas. San Antonio, where his mother lived, where he claimed to have fond memories. But who was he sharing Cabernet Sauvignon with, the same bottle he once toasted our 10th anniversary with while lying to my face? I snapped photos, hands shaking, heart shattering. Later, in the garage, his SUV still warm, I found it, the lubricant, dried residue on the cap. Proof. We hadn't touched in years. Too tired, he'd say. Age kills desire. So whose desire was this for? I didn't scream, didn't break. I planned. I documented everything, napkins soaked in her perfume, the email, the receipt. Then I called in a favor. Mrs. Miller gave me the number of Tomasa, a private investigator, who specialized in catching liars like Julian. By noon, I met him in a quiet cafe, handed him a flash drive loaded with evidence. I think my husband is cheating, I whispered, the words tasting like poison. He didn't flinch, just nodded. I'll follow him today. That night, my phone buzzed. A photo. Julian hand in hand with Allison, my daughter. In law. Tight black dress, red lips, leaning into him like he was her lover, not her father. In law. Then more photos, candlelit dinners, hotel balconies, a kiss quick stolen, real. And then, the audio. Her voice, sharp as glass. Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want that old hag out of the house. His reply, don't worry. Juliet trusts me too much. They weren't just sleeping together. They were stealing my bakery, my life's work, my home. So I set a trap. I swapped the lube for superglue, planted a recorder in our bedroom, faked a business trip, and triggered a smoke alarm just enough to bring the fire department racing to my door. At 10 a.m., Allison arrived, sunglasses, floral dress, smug smile. Julian pulled her inside like a thief in the night. I watched from across the street, headphones on, listening as their laughter turned to panic. What the hell is this? We're stuck. Shut up. Let me. Then smoke, sirens, chaos. And then, my son Daniel, fire chief, hero, their victim, kicked down the door. Imagine his face, his wife, his father, naked, glued together, humiliated. The neighborhood saw it all, phones recording, mouths gaping, whispers spreading like wildfire. At the hospital, I swapped their healing ointment for mustard, their screams, music to my broken heart. I walked in, dropped divorce papers on the bed, and said, 40 years end now, sign, disappear, never touch my son or my bakery again. Allison sobbed. Julian begged. Daniel. He just stared, then walked out, his world in ruins. But here's the twist. We rebuilt my bakery, busier than ever. Daniel moved in. We bake flan together now, just like I taught Allison once. Only this time, the love is real, the trust earned. I go to church, join cooking clubs, walk with Mrs. Peterson. People call me strong, but strength isn't the absence of pennants rising through it. Julian and Allison lost everything: reputation, family, each other. I lost a marriage, but kept my soul. So tell me, where are you listening from? Drop your city below. Hit like, subscribe. Because revenge isn't sweet. Justice is. And this is just the beginning. The glove compartments, the morning fog clung to the streets like a mourner's veil, soft and suffocating. I stood in the driveway, keys in hand, staring at Julian's SUV, the same vehicle he'd driven for 12 years. The one I'd watched carry him off to client dinners more times than I could count. It had once been a symbol of stability, silver paint dulled by time, leather seats worn smooth from decades of use, the faint scent of his cologne lingering like a ghost in the upholstery. But that morning, it felt like a tomb. I opened the driver's door out of habit, not necessity. I hadn't planned to drive anywhere. I just needed to feel close to something familiar, even if it was only metal and memory. My fingers brushed the steering wheel, cool, unyielding, and then drifted toward the glove compartment. A reflex, a wife's quiet ritual. I used to check it for parking tickets, insurance cards, the occasional love note he'd tuck in during our early years, for my Juliet light of my life. Those notes had stopped 20 years ago, but the habit remained. This time, my fingers closed around something slick. I pulled it out slowly, as if disturbing a sleeping snake. A tube of personal lubricant. Not just any tube. The cap was loose, the nozzle crusted with a faint, sticky residue that glistened under the pale dawn light. My stomach dropped like a stone into a well. I stood there in the garage, the door half open, the scent of gasoline and motor oil suddenly sharpened my nostrils, as if the air itself recoiled in disgust. 40 years. 40 years of marriage, of shared birthdays, hospital vigils, silent breakfasts, and whispered dreams in the dark. 40 years of believing Julian was the kind of man who could never betray me. And now, here was proof, cold and clinical, nestled between a spare tire iron and an expired registration slip. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even breathe for a full 3 seconds. Instead, I did something far more dangerous. I thought. My mind, usually so calm, so practiced in the art of wifely patience, snapped into focus like a blade being unsheathed. Every detail mattered now. The brand of the lubricant, one I'd never bought. The faint floral scent, clinging to the plastic, not my rosewater perfume. The way the cap had been twisted back on carelessly, as if whoever used it hadn't cared who might find it. Because they never thought I would. I placed the tube back exactly as I'd found it. Then, I wiped my hands on my apron, not because they were dirty, but because I needed to feel clean again, to scrub away the invisible stain of this discovery. But I wasn't done. If there was one clue, there would be more. I searched the car with the precision of a forensic investigator. Under the passenger seat, crumpled napkins, damp with the same cloying floral perfume. In the cup holder, a lipstick-stained coffee cup from a cafe I'd never heard of. In the center console, a receipt from a boutique hotel downtown, dated 2 nights ago. And then the phone. Julian had left it charging on the kitchen counter, screen dark, but when I picked it up, it lit with a single notification: new email. My pulse hammered in my throat. Julian hated email. Always said, Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call. He used his phone for calls, texts, maybe the occasional weather check. That was it. So why was there an email? And why did it sit unopened, glowing like a warning flare in the quiet of our home? I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message was short, just one line. You were incredible tonight, Dad. The red heart pulsed on the screen like a wound. Dad. The word echoed in my skull, sharp and dissonant. Julian had one son, Daniel. No daughters, no nieces he doted on, no godchildren he called sweetheart. So who was this, and why did she call him Dad with such intimacy, such affection? I swiped down, desperate for more. A name, a signature, anything, but there was only a jumbled email address, X7J9M2 at privaterelay.appleid.com. Anonymous, untraceable, a digital ghost. A cold wind seemed to blow through the cracks of my life, revealing a hidden room I never knew existed, one filled with lies, laughter, and stolen moments I wasn't meant to see. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it. My hands trembled, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. Then I checked his pants pockets while he slept. Their dash crisp and Dominga, receipt from Le Chain, a high-end steakhouse in San Antonio. Dated last night, 2 entrees, a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, the very same vintage he'd ordered for our 10th anniversary, the night he toasted my first bakery opening with tears in his eyes. He'd told me he was in Dallas. San Antonio was a 3-hour drive. He'd never liked Dallas traffic, always complained about it. But San Antonio, that was where his mother had lived, where he claimed to have fond memories. He'd mentioned it just last week, wistful, over Sunday coffee. Now I understood. He wasn't visiting ghosts, he was making new ones with someone else. I took photos of everything: the email, the receipt, the napkins, the lubricant. I saved them to a hidden folder on my phone, labeled only with a string of random numbers. Then I backed them up to a flash drive I kept in my recipe box, between Grandma's flan and Daniel's birthday cake. Because this wasn't paranoia, this was evidence. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Julian had collapsed into bed, his snores filling the house like a cruel lullaby. The old clock on the wall, my mother's wedding gift, ticked with a rhythm that now felt accusatory. Guilty, guilty, guilty. I thought of our early days, Julian holding my hand as we signed the lease on our first bakery, his eyes bright with pride. "You're going to change this town, Juliet," he'd said. And for years, I believed he meant it, believed in me. But now I wondered if he'd been waiting all along, waiting for me to build something worth stealing. The next morning, I made his coffee just the way he liked it. Black, 2 sugars. I fried his eggs, toasted his bread, set the plate before him with a smile that felt like cracked porcelain. He barely looked up. "I've got a big meeting today," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Might be late." I nodded. "Be careful." He patted my shoulder on his way out, a gesture so hollow it might as well have been a stranger's hand. The moment the door clicked shut, I picked up my phone and dialed Mrs. Miller. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Juliet, is everything all right?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I need Thomas's number." A pause. Then, softly, "Oh honey." She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Some truths are written in the silence between words. An hour later, I sat across from Thomas in a corner booth of Coff Lumiere, a place I used to visit with Julian on lazy Sundays. The air smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon ones, comforting, now foreign. Thomas was shorter than I expected, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interrupting as I handed him the flash drive. "I think my husband is cheating on me," I said, the words tasting like ash. He nodded, scrolling through the photos. "And you suspect who it is?" "I don't know," I lied, "but I need to be sure." Thomas closed his notebook. "I'll start this afternoon." "Don't confront him. Don't change your routine. And whatever you do, don't let him suspect you're watching." I left the cafe feeling lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because I wasn't alone anymore. Heavier because I'd just admitted, out loud, that my life might be a lie. That night, as I kneaded dough in the bakery's back room, the same motions I'd performed for 40 years, my phone buzzed. A photo. Julian, in his favorite light blue shirt, stepping out of a black sedan. Beside him, a woman in a tight black dress, her arm looped through his. I zoomed in by breath, stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. The woman I'd hugged like a daughter. The woman I'd taught to make flan, twofold and to laugh at Daniel's terrible jokes. She leaned into Julian like he was her lover, and he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. I sank onto a flour-dusted stool. The phone clutched in my hand like a live wire. The bakery around me, the ovens, the trays, the scent of Venefelt, like a stage set. A beautiful, elaborate facade hiding a rot at its core. They weren't just having an affair. They were performing one right under my nose, right in front of my son and I. I was the audience who hadn't realized the play had begun, but no more. I saved the photo. Then I opened a new note on my phone and typed 3 words. Plan the trap, because if they wanted to destroy my life, I would make sure the whole world watched them burn. The hotel balcony, the cafe door chimed behind me as I stepped into the afternoon sun. the warmth doing nothing to thaw the ice in my chest. Thomas's words echoed in my mind. Don't do anything to arouse suspicion. Simple advice, impossible to follow when every breath felt like swallowing glass. I walked home slowly, past Mrs. Peterson's garden roses in full bloom, petals soft as forgiveness, and past the bakery's back alley, where the scent of yeast and caramel usually soothed me like a lullaby. Today, it smelled like a lie. Everything did. That night, I stood in the bakery's kitchen long after closing, kneading dough with a violence I'd never allowed myself before. My hands, calloused from decades of rolling pins, oven racks, and sugar sacks, worked the flour and water into submission, as if I could pound the truth out of the world. The radio played softly in the background, a Spanish love song that once made Julian sway with me in this very room. Now, the melody felt like mockery. My phone buzzed on the counter. A single notification from an unknown number. Photo attached. I wiped my hands on my apron, heart hammering like a trapped bird, and tapped the image. There he was, Julian, in his favorite light blue shirts, the one I'd ironed, that very morning standing outside La Chain, San Antonio's most discreet Findini establishment. Beside him, arm looped through his like they'd been lovers for years, was Allison. My daughter-in-law. She wore a black dress that clung to her like a second skin, red lipstick sharp as a warning, hair loose and gleaming under the restaurant's golden awning light. They weren't just dining, they were performing intimacy, the tilt of her head, the press of her hip against his, the way his hand rested possessively on the small of her back. I sank onto a flour-dusted stool, the phone trembling in my grip. Allison. The girl I'd welcomed into our family with open arms, the woman I'd taught to fold empanadas the way my abuela taught me, the one who'd cried on my shoulder when she and Daniel argued about wedding plans. You're the mother I never had, she'd whispered once, eyes glistening. And now she was calling my husband Dad in emails signed with red hearts. Replayed the image in my mind like a broken record. At family dinners, she'd barely speak to Julian. Once, Daniel joked, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I'd laughed it off, believed it, trusted it. But trust, I was learning, was just another ingredient, one that could be faked, diluted, or poisoned. More messages came. A second photo, candlelight flickering on white linen, wine glasses raised in a toast, Julian's eyes soft, adoring, alive, locked onto hers. I hadn't seen that look in 20 years. Not since before the bakery took off. Not since I stopped being just Juliet and became the owner, the boss, the provider. Then a video. I plugged in my headphones, as if shielding the truth from the walls themselves, and pressed play. Nighttime, a hotel balcony, glass doors, city lights below. Julian stood with his arm around Allison's waist. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, hair blowing in the warm Texas breeze. Then quick, casual, devastating, they kissed. Not a peck, not a mistake. A kiss full of ownership, of shared secrets, of plans. The camera zoomed slightly. Thomas had done his job well. I watched it 3 times. Each replay carved another piece out of me. But the worst was yet to come. At 2:03 a.m., another message. This time, audio. I hesitated. Some part of me still clung to denial, the fragile hope that this was all a nightmare. A fever dream brought on by stress and too many sleepless nights. But the wife of 40 years knew better. Intuition isn't magic. It's memory. It's pattern recognition. It's the quiet tally of 1,000 tiny betrayals. I pressed play. Allison's voice, sweet, girlish, venomous, cut through the silence. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." My breath caught. Old hag me. The woman who'd hugged her when she miscarried, who'd stayed up all night baking her favorite flan after her father died. Then Julian, calm, confident, utterly without remorse. "Don't worry about those papers. Juliet doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much. She trusts me too much." The words landed like a hammer. Not just betrayal calculation. They weren't just sleeping together. They were plotting to steal my life's work, the bakery, the brand, the legacy I'd built from a single storefront in San Diego to a chain that fed half the city. Julian had never lifted a sack of flour, never negotiated a hotel contract, never stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting a new pastry recipe. But he wanted the profits. And Allison, she wanted the throne. I sat in the dark kitchen, the audio looping in my ears. Tears finally coming, not soft, healing tears, but hot, furious ones that burned my cheeks. I wanted to scream, to throw the mixing bowls against the wall, to call Daniel and shatter his world with the truth. But I didn't, because screaming wouldn't stop them. Only proof would. I copied the audio file to my flash drive, the same one hidden between Grandma's flan and Daniel's birthday cake. Then I printed every photo, every receipt, every frame of that balcony kiss. I labeled them with dates, times, locations. I created a timeline in my mind. Julian's business trips, Allison's sudden work conferences, the nights they both claimed to be exhausted. It was all connected, a spider web of lies, and I was the fly who'd finally seen the threads. The next morning, I baked as usual. Croissants, conchas, flan. My hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory carrying me through motions that once brought joy. Customers came and went, praising the pastries, unaware that the woman behind the counter was hollowing out from the inside. At noon, Thomas sent more photos. Julian and Allison leaving a law office downtown. Her in a beige suit, sunglasses hiding her eyes, him holding a thick manila envelope. Then more. A shot of them entering the Grand Royal Hotel, a 4-star establishment known for discretion and luxury. They rented the room for the afternoon. Thomas texted, "Looks like they're staying the night." I read the message over and over, my throat tight. Just hours earlier, Julian had texted me, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. Meeting a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He'd even added a heart emoji. Now I knew. The partner was Allison. The out of town was a block away, and the rest he wanted me to get. It was so he could turn my home into their playground. That night, Julian came home reeking of whiskey and cheap cologne. Another performance. The client was impossible. He slurred, collapsing onto the couch. Had to drink half a bottle just to close the deal. I handed him water, my voice steady. "Rest, Julian, you have work tomorrow." He patted my shoulder light, dismissive. On stumbled to bed. The moment his snores began, my phone buzzed. Thomas again recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. Sending now. I put on my headphones, bracing myself. The audio was crisp, intimate. "Allison, once we transferred the bakery deeds, we can sell the downtown location. That old hag will have nowhere to go." "Julian, she's stubborn." Allison, laughing. "Not if she thinks it's her idea. You'll suggest she retire. Say you're worried about her health." "Julian, she believe me. She always does." I turned off the recording. My hands were steady now. The rage had cooled into something sharper, clearer, resolve. They weren't just stealing my business, they were erasing me. And I would not go quietly. I waited until Julian was deep in sleep, out open, one arm dangling off the bed before slipping into the garage. The night air was still, the crickets silent, as if the world held its breath for what I was about to do. I opened the SUV's glove compartment. There it was, the lubricant tube, cap loose, residue dried like a confession. I picked it up, the plastic cool and slick in my palm. I thought of their bodies tangled in my bed, of Allison's laughter echoing through rooms that should have been sacred. I thought of Daniel, proud and trusting, calling them both family. I carried the tube to the kitchen. From the tool drawer beneath the sink, I retrieved a tube of industrial-strength superglutathione. I used to repair broken display cases, clear, viscous, permanent. I unscrewed the lubricant cap and poured the glue inside, drop by drop, until the tube was full. I shook it gently. It flowed smoothly, indistinguishable from the original. Then I wiped the nozzle, replaced the cap, and returned it to the glove compartment, exactly as I'd found it. But I wasn't done. I needed them here, in my house, in my bed, where the whole neighborhood could see. So the next morning, over breakfast, I said casually, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'll be back late." Julian's eyes flickered just for a second, but I saw it. Relief. "Big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with false warmth. "The biggest," I said, smiling. "Can you handle dinner?" "Of course," he said, squeezing my fingers. "Go ahead, I'll manage." But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and I knew he was already planning to invite her over. That night, I pretended to go to bed early. "Early buff," I told him. "Need my rest." He kissed my forehead, a gesture so hollow, it made my skin crawl, and turned off the light. I waited. At midnight, his phone lit up. He crept from the room, whispering into the receiver, "Yes, Come over tomorrow. Juliet's gone. We won't need a hotel anymore. Allison's giggle floated through the speaker like poison. Finally, that old hag's out of the way. I didn't move, didn't breathe. When he returned, I feigned sleep, my body rigid beneath the sheets, but my mind was racing. I rose silently and retrieved Daniel's old voice recorder from the closet, the one he'd used in college. I inserted fresh batteries, set it to continuous recording, and hid it behind the bookshelf, angled toward the bed. I covered the wire with a framed photo. Our family at Daniel and Allison's wedding. Her in white, him beaming, Julian with his arm around me, smiling like a man who'd won the lottery. Now, that photo was a tombstone. I returned to bed, eyes wide open in the dark. At dawn, I left the house with the suitcase, waving to Mrs. Peterson across the street. Business trip, I called. Back tonight. She nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She'd known me too long. Instead of heading to the bus station, I crossed the street and knocked on her door. Can I stay a few hours? I asked, voice trembling just enough to seem real. I need to watch the house. Something feels off. She didn't ask questions, just poured me coffee and pointed to the window seat. From there, I had a perfect view of my front door. At 10 a.m., a taxi pulled up. Allison stepped out in a floral dress, sunglasses hiding her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. Julian opened the door, glanced around like a thief, and yanked her inside. I activated the recorder app on my phone. Their laughter filled my headphones. Greedy, cruel, the old hag's gone, Allison said, voice dripping with contempt. Now we can finally relax, Julian replied. Then the bed creaked. I closed my eyes, breathed through the nausea, and waited. Minutes later, Allison's voice shattered the rhythm. What the hell is this? We're stuck. Panic, confusion, fear. Julian growled. Shut up, let me, I smiled. Then I pulled the string tied to the stove. IGN, ITER. Flame met oil. Black. Smoke billowed from the kitchen window, a signal flare to the world. Mrs. Peterson gasped. Juliet, your house is on fire. Neighbors poured into the street. Someone called 911. And then sirens. Red lights flashing. My son Daniel, fire chief, leaping from the truck, shouting orders. I watched through the window as he kicked down the front door, as he stormed into the bedroom, as he froze, because there they were, his father and his wife, naked, glued together, writhing in humiliation. The truth exposed. Not in whispers, not in shadows, but in front of God, the fire department, and every neighbor who'd ever called me sweet Juliet. Justice, I thought, isn't sweet, but it is seen. The hospital mustered, the ambulance doors slammed shut, with a finality that echoed through the street like a gavel striking wood. Neighbors still lingered on their porches, phones raised, voices hushed but hungry. Did you see her face? One whispered, he's her father-in-law. Another gasped, as if saying it aloud made the betrayal more real and more grotesque. I stood among them, clutching my purse like a shield, my expression carefully calibrated, wide-eyed, trembling. The picture of a woman who'd just returned from a business trip to find her world in flames. Mrs. Peterson stayed close, her arm looped through mine, her silence louder than any question. Inside the ambulance, Julian and Allison were wrapped in thin emergency blankets, their bodies, still fused at the hips by the industrial superglue I'd so meticulously substituted. Every jostle of the vehicle must have sent fresh waves of pain through them, sharp, burning, inescapable. Justice, I thought, doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes, it wears a paramedic's uniform and smells like antiseptic and shame. At the hospital, chaos gave way to clinical order. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nurses moved with brisk efficiency, but nothing could mask the scandal simmering beneath the surface. Whispers followed Julian and Allison down the hall, like a second skin. A young orderly dropped a tray when he recognized them from the viral video, already circulating on neighborhood group chats. I followed at a distance, my heels clicking softly against the linoleum. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, cold, ready. In the triage room, a harried doctor examined them, his expression shifting from professional concern to stunned disbelief. This is unusual, he muttered, peeling back the blanket just enough to see the damage. Industrial adhesive. Will need and patience. Allison sobbed into her hands. It burns. Please, make it stop. Julian, pale and sweating, kept his eyes shut, as if by refusing to look at the world, he could pretend it hadn't seen him. I lingered near the doorway, unnoticed, until the doctor stepped out to consult with the dermatologist. That's when I made my move. From my purse, I retrieved 2 small tubes identical to the hospital's standard issue skin ointment, right down to the label I'd printed at the bakery's office printer. But inside, not healing balm, mustard thick, yellow, and searing. I'd prepared it the night before, after the fire department left and the neighbors finally dispersed. I mixed it with a touch of vinegar to amplify the sting, then sealed it in sterile tubes I'd salvaged from old baking supply orders. It wasn't cruel, it was symmetry. They'd used intimacy as a weapon. Now, pain would be their bedfellow. When the nurse turned her back to fetch gauze, I swapped the tubes in one fluid motion. Years of handling delicate pastries had given me steady hands. Then I walked into the room. "Julian, Allison," I said, voice trembling with just the right amount of concern. "Are you all right?" Allison flinched as if I'd struck her. She couldn't meet my eyes. Julian opened his mouth, desperation cracking his voice. "Juliet, I can explain." "Don't," I said softly, placing the mustard tube on the bedside table. "Just take care of yourselves." I left before they could respond. 2 minutes later, the scream tore through the ward like a siren. "It's burning. My skin, it's on fire." Allison shrieked, clawing at her thighs. Julian roared in agony, thrashing against the restraints the nurses had belatedly applied. "What is this? Who did this?" Nurses rushed in. The doctor returned, baffled. "This isn't our ointment." But it was too late. The damage was done, not physical, not permanent, but humiliating. And in that moment, as they writhed in mustard-induced torment, the last vestiges of their dignity dissolved. Outside the room, people gathered again. A man in scrubs muttered, "That's the couple from the video, the father-in-law and daughter-in-law." An elderly woman crossed herself. "They deserve worse." I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching through the glass partition. Not with glee, not with triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of a baker who'd finally pulled a perfectly risen loaf from the oven after years of failed batches. Then I saw him. Daniel T.I. stood at the far end of the corridor, still in his fire chief uniform, helmet tucked under his arm. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow. He'd watched them carry his wife and his father out of their home naked, glued together, exposed to the entire block. He'd heard the whispers, seen the videos, felt the weight of a double betrayal from the 2 people he trusted most. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then I walked to him, slowly, and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. He was a statue carved from grief. "Mom," he whispered, voice raw. "Why? Why them?" I had no answer that wouldn't break him further. So I simply said, "I'm so sorry you had to see that." He nodded, jaw clenched. Then, without another word, he turned and strode down the hall toward the room where I'd hidden the evidence. I'd called him from Mrs. Peterson's house, right after the ambulance left. "Go to the house, in the dresser drawer, under the photo album. Bring everything." He returned 10 minutes later, a manila envelope clutched in his hand. His knuckles were white. He handed it to me in the hospital cupola, quiet space with stained glass, casting fractured rainbows across the pews. I opened it. Photos, receipts, hotel surveillance, stills, the audio file. And 2 copies of divorce papers I'd drafted the night before, notarized and ready. "Read it," I said. He did, page by page. His breathing grew shallow. When he reached the audio transcript, "I want that old hag out of the house," his hands began to shake. "This was planned?" he asked, voice barely audible. "They were going to steal the bakery," I said, "transfer the deeds, kick me out, and you were just collateral." He closed his eyes. A single tear tracked down his cheek. "I defended her," he whispered. "To you, to everyone. I said she was family." "You were right to," I said gently. "You just didn't know what kind." We sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the distant hum of the hospitala world continuing, even as ours had shattered. Then I stood. "It's time." We walked back to the room together. Julian and Allison were cleaned now, bandaged, sedated, but awake. The mustard had been washed away, but the shame clung to them like smoke. I placed the divorce papers on the tray between their beds. 40 years end here," I said, my voice clear, calm, unbreakable. "Sign these. Disappear. Never contact Daniel again. Never set foot near my bakery. And if I hear you've tried to sell a single recipe, a single name, I'll release everything. The photos, the audio, the hotel footage. Do you understand?" Allison burst into tears. "Daniel, Please, it was a mistake. I love you. But Daniel didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of quiet devastation. Julian reached for my hand. Juliet, please, after all we've been through, you chose her, I said, pulling away. Now live with it. The nurse entered, frowning. Visiting hours are over, and you need to keep the noise down. I turned to leave. Daniel followed that in the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds. He leaned against his fire truck, arms crossed, staring at the ground. I don't have a home anymore, he said quietly. Yes, you do, I replied. You have mine. He looked up, eyes searching mine. Are you sure? I took his hand, the same hand that had once reached for me when he was a boy with scraped knees. You're my son. That never changes. Not even when the world burns. He nodded, and for the first time since the fire, he hugged me tight, desperate, like a man clinging to solid ground in a storm. The bakery reopens 3 days later. The closed for personal reasons sign came down. The bell above the door jingled as I unlocked the bakery at dawn. Flour dusted the counters like fresh snow. The ovens hummed to life. The scent of vanilla and yeast filled the air, familiar, comforting. Mine. By 7 a.m., customers were already lining up. Juliet, Mrs. Peterson called, holding a thermos of coffee. We've all been waiting. Word had spread, not just about the scandal but about my silence, my strength, my refusal to crumble. Inside, Daniel stood behind the counter, apron tied, hair still damp from his morning run. He'd moved into the spare room above the bakery the night before, his firefighter's duffel bag sitting neatly in the corner. Morning, Mom, he said, handing me a cup of black coffee just how I liked it. Morning, I replied, squeezing his arm. We worked in silence for a while, the rhythm of decades returning. Me kneading dough, him boxing pastries, both of us avoiding the unspoken question, what now? But healing doesn't need words, it needs presence. At noon, a reporter from the local paper showed up. Can we get a comment? She asked, notebook in hand. I shook my head. My story is in my pastries. Come back when you're hungry. She left. But others stayed, neighbors, friends, strangers, who'd heard about the woman who stood up to liars. By closing time, we'd sold out of everything, even the experimental lavender croissants that night. Over rice and beans at the small kitchen table, Daniel finally spoke. Mom, can you teach me how to make flan again? I looked up, surprised. He gave a small, sad smile. The real way, not the way she learned. My throat tightened. Of course. We made it together that weekend. Caramel bubbling in the pot, sweetened milk simmering on the stove, the custard setting in the oven like a promised thought as we stirred. He said, I used to think love was enough, that if you loved someone, they'd never hurt you. I didn't look at him. Love is necessary, I said softly, but trust, that's earned. And once it's broken, it doesn't glue back together. Not really, he nodded. Then what do we build on? I turned off the stove. On truth, on work, on showing up even when it hurts. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad you're my mom. I kissed his forehead. And I'm glad you're my son. A new rhythm in the weeks that followed. Life settled into a new cadence. Daniel took over client relations, calling hotels, negotiating contracts, even designing a new logo for the bakery chain. We'll call it Juliet's Legacy, he said one morning, showing me a mock-up on his laptop. I laughed. Too dramatic. Nah, he said. It's honest. I joined a cooking club at the community center, where women my age shared recipes and stories of their own heartbreaks. You've got steel in your spine, Juliet, one told me, patting my hand. Most of us would have collapsed. I did, I admitted, but the oven was still hot. Someone had to tend it. I started going to church on Sundays, not to pray for forgiveness, but for clarity, for peace, for Daniel's heart to heal. And every evening, we walked together through the town square, past the houses where neighbors once gossiped, now nodding at us with quiet respect. Julian and Allison, they vanished. Rumors said they'd moved to another state, that they'd split up within weeks, that Allison tried to sue for defamation, but dropped the case when Thomas threatened to release the full audio. I never checked. I didn't need to, because I had what mattered. My hands in dough, my son at my side, my name above the door, and every morning, when the sun rose over the bakery's awning, I whispered the same thing I'd told myself in the garage that first night. They wanted to erase me, but I'm still here. Juliet's Legacy. The scandal didn't fade, it fermented. Within a week, the video of Julian and Allison being carried out of the house, wrapped in a thin hospital sheet, glued together at the hips, had been viewed over 2 million times. Local news outlets picked it up under headlines like Bakery, Betrayal, and Superglue Justice. A true crime podcast dedicated an entire episode to it, calling it the most poetic act of domestic accountability in modern memory. But I never watched it. I didn't need to. I lived it in the quiet moments. In the way customers lingered longer at the counter, not just to buy pastries, but to say, "You're an inspiration." Juliet, in the handwritten note slipped under the bakery door. "My husband cheated too. Thank you for showing us we don't have to stay silent." I kept every one of them in a shoebox beneath my bed, next to the flash drive, the divorce decree, and the original tube of superglue, now empty, preserved like a relic. The bakery, once just a business, became a sanctuary. People came not only for the flan or the conch, but for the unspoken promise that this place was built on truth, that here, love wasn't a performance, it was flour on your hands, sweat on your brow, and showing up even when your heart was broken. Daniel handled the business side with a quiet intensity I'd never seen in him before. He redesigned our website, launched a delivery app, and negotiated a partnership with a regional grocery chain to sell our pastries under the new brand, Juliet's Legacy. "You're not just selling bread, Mom," he told me one morning, stirring caramel for flan. "You're selling survival." I smiled. "Then let's make sure it tastes like hope." The first public speaking engagement 3 months after the fire, I received an email from the San Diego Women's Empowerment Forum. "Dear Mrs. Roberts, we've heard your story, not the viral version but the real one, the one about a woman who refused to be erased. We'd be honored if you'd speak at our annual gathering." I almost deleted it. Public speaking, me, I'd spent 40 years behind an oven, not a microphone. But that night, as I kneaded dough under the soft kitchen light, I thought of all the women who'd whispered their secrets to me over coffee, who'd cried in the bakery's back room after their own betrayals. They didn't need a hero. They needed proof that you could rebuild. So I said yes. The event was held in a sunlit auditorium overlooking the harbor, the same view I'd gazed at as a girl, dreaming of opening my first shop. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pinned back, no makeup, but for a touch of lipstick Daniel insisted I wear. "You look like yourself," he said. "That's enough." I stepped onto the stage, heart pounding, and looked out at 500 women, some young, some older, many with the same hollow eyes I'd seen in the mirror that night in the garage. "I'm not here to tell you how to get revenge," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm here to tell you how to reclaim." I spoke of the lubricant, the email, the hotel balcony, but more than that, I spoke of the silence that follows betrayal, the way it wraps around your ribs like wire. I spoke of the moment I chose not to collapse, but to document, not to scream, but to plan. And I spoke of the morning after the fire, when I stood in the kitchen and realized my hands still knew how to bake. Applause erupted, not polite, but thunderous. Women stood, some cried, one shouted, "We see you, Juliet." Afterward, a line formed. A woman in her 30s gripped my hand. "My husband's stealing from our business. I didn't know what to do until I heard your story." I handed her a card with Thomas's number, yes, I'd kept in touch, and whispered, "Start with evidence, end with peace." As I walked back to the car with Daniel, he said, "You were amazing, Mom." I shook my head. "I just told the truth." "That's the rarest thing of all," he replied. "The unraveling of Julian and Allison while our lives rebuilt. There's collapse. Rumors reached us in fragments, passed through neighbors who still couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. Julian lost his job. His firm couldn't tolerate the scandal. Allison's teaching license was suspended after parents complained about moral unfitness. They tried to rent an apartment together, but landlords recognized them from the news and turned them away. Worst of all, they turned on each other. Thomas, ever the professional, sent me one final update. 6 months in, Allison filed a restraining order against Julian, claims he threatened her. Julian countersued, saying she tried to blackmail him with the audio. They're both broke, selling everything. I read the message and deleted it without response. I didn't gloat. I didn't rejoice. I simply closed my laptop, dusted flour on the counter, and began shaping dough for tomorrow's croissants. Justice, I'd learned, isn't about watching your enemies fall. It's about refusing to fall with them. Daniel's healing didn't come in a single moment. It came in fragments like shards of glass slowly reassembling into something new. One evening, while we boxed pastries for a wedding order, he said quietly, I used to think love was loyalty, that if you married someone, you were bound to them forever. I paused, rolling pin in hand. And now I think love is choice, he said. Every day, you choose whether to stay honest, whether to show up, whether to protect the people you say you care about. He looked at me then, really looked at me. You chose me, Mom. Even when it would have been easier to disappear. I wiped my hands and hugged him long tight, the way I had when he was 6 and scraped his knee. You chose yourself too, I whispered. And that's the bravest thing of all. A few weeks later, he started seeing a therapist. Then he joined a support group for adult children of dysfunctional families. He never shared details, but I saw the change. The way he laughed again during deliveries, the ease in his shoulders when he walked through the bakery door. One Sunday, he brought home a woman named Elena, paramedic, he'd met during a fire call. She was kind-eyed, soft-spoken, and didn't flinch when he told her about his past. She asked if I still trust people. He told me later. I said, not blindly, but I'm learning to trust actions. She smiled and said, that's wisdom, not cynicism. I knew then he'd be okay. The bakery grows by the end of the year. We opened a second location, this one in downtown San Diego, near the old pier where Julian and I had our first date. I almost didn't do it. Too many ghosts, but Daniel insisted. Let's make new memories here, Mom, ones that belong to us. The grand opening was packed. Mrs. Peterson brought her grandchildren. Thomas came, standing quietly in the back, nodding when our eyes met. Even the fire chief's crew showed up, wearing t-shirts that read Team Juliet. We served flan in tiny cups, each one topped with a single, edible gold leaf, because you deserve to shine, Daniel had said. As I stood behind the counter, watching customers laugh and share pastries, I felt something I hadn't in years. Joy. Not the bright, naive joy of my 20s, but a deeper, quieter kind, the kind that comes after you've walked through fire and found your hands still capable of creation. A letter from the past. One rainy afternoon, a manila envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, Juliet, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I need you to know, I loved you once, truly, and the man who betrayed you, he wasn't the man you married. He was a coward who let fear and greed twist him into something unrecognizable. I've lost everything. My son won't speak to me. My name is Mud, and every night, I hear your mother's clock ticking in my dreams. Guilty, guilty, guilty. I hope you found peace. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever known. Julie and I read it once, then I folded it neatly and placed it in the shoebox with the rest. Not as a treasure, not as a wound, but as a marker. This is where the lie ended. The new normal life settled into a new rhythm. Mornings began with the hum of the oven and the scent of vanilla. Afternoons were for deliveries, customer chats, and teaching Daniel the secret to perfect churro. Dough, the oil must be hot but not angry, I'd say. Evenings were for quiet dinners, walks with Mrs. Peterson, and sometimes just sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors too beautiful to name. I never remarried, never wanted to. My love now was for my work, my son, and the quiet dignity of a life rebuilt with honest hands. People still ask me, was it worth it? I tell them, revenge wasn't the goal. Clarity was. They wanted to erase me, to steal my name, my home, my son's trust. But in trying to destroy me, they gave me back my voice. And from that voice, I built something they could never take away. Epilogue. The Recipe book. Last month, we published Juliet's Legacy, Recipes and Resilience, a cookbook filled not just with pastry instructions but with stories of loss, of courage, of starting over. The dedication reads, for every woman who's been told she's too much or not enough, you are whole, you are worthy, and your hands, no matter how scarred, can still create something beautiful. At the book signing, a young woman approached me, eyes glistening. My husband's cheating, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I handed her a copy, then leaned in. First, I said, breathe, then gather your evidence, protect your peace, and never, ever, let anyone convince you that your life isn't worth fighting for. She nodded, clutching the book like a lifeline. As she walked away, Daniel appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. Proud of you, Mom, he said. I took his arm. Proud of us. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of sugar, the murmur of voices, and the steady beat of my own heart, I knew the fire hadn't destroyed me, it had revealed me. The final chapter. There comes a moment in every woman's life, not marked on any calendar, not heralded by fanfare, when she realizes she is no longer surviving, She is thriving. For me, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning, standing behind the counter of Juliet's Legacy, flour dusting my forearms like sacred ash, watching Daniel laugh with a customer over a batch of slightly misshapen They're rustic, he said with a wink, like us. And in that instant, I understood. The fire hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me, the truth about justice. People still ask me, was it worth it? Did the humiliation, the heartbreak, the nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering if love was just another word for vulnerability, did it all lead to something real? My answer is always the same. Revenge wasn't the goal. Clarity was. I didn't swap that lubricant for superglue because I wanted them to suffer, though they did. I did it because I needed the world to see. Because betrayal thrives in silence, but truth demands a witness. Julian and Allison thought they could steal my life in the shadows, my bakery, my son's trust, even my dignity, and vanish into a new future built on my ruins. But I gave them a stage instead. And on that stage, under the flashing red lights of the fire truck, in front of neighbors who'd known me for decades, the lie unraveled in real time. That's not revenge, that's accountability. And accountability is the first step toward healing, not just for me, but for Daniel, for the community, for every woman who's ever been told, maybe you're imagining things. What I learned in the ashes in the months that followed, I learned 3 truths that changed everything. 1. Trust is not a promise, it's a practice. Julian broke mine not in one grand betrayal, but in 1,000 tiny lies, the fake business trips, the rehearsed excuses, the way he patted my shoulder like I was furniture. Real trust isn't given once and forgotten. It's renewed every day in honesty, in presence, in choosing each other even when it's hard. 2. Strength isn't the absence of pain. It's the refusal to let pain define you. I cried. I raged. I sat in the bakery at 3 a.m., staring at the ovens like they held answers. But I never stopped baking. Because creation is resistance. Every flan I made, every loaf I pulled from the oven, was a declaration. I am still here. 3. Family isn't blood, it's loyalty. Julian was my husband for 40 years. Allison called me mom. But Daniel, he chose me. Even after his world shattered, he came home, not because I was perfect but because I was real, and in the end, that's all any of us need. Someone who sees the cracks and stays anyway. Where they are now, I don't keep tabs on Julian and Allison, but the world does. Last I heard, they'd split within months. Allison tried to open a pastry shop in another state using my recipes. A former customer recognized the flan and posted side-by-side photos online. The backlash was instant. Her business closed in 6 weeks. Julian, he lives in a small apartment near the airport, working part-time at a car rental agency. No one speaks to him at the grocery store. His name is a cautionary tale whispered at family dinners. Remember what happened to Julian Roberts. I feel no joy in their downfall. Only peace. Because justice isn't about punishment, it's about balance, and the scales have finally settled. The bakery today Legacy now has 3 locations. We employ 12 people, mostly women rebuilding their own lives. One is a single mother escaping an abusive marriage. Another is a refugee who lost everything in a war. I teach them more than recipes. I teach them this: your hands can create beauty, even if your heart is broken. Every Friday, we host Second Chance Saturdays, a free baking class for survivors of domestic betrayal. We knead dough, share stories, and remind each other, you are not what they tried to make you. Daniel runs operations now. He's dating Elena, the paramedic, and they talk about opening a 4th location near the fire academy. We'll call it Phoenix, he joked, because we rose from the ashes. I didn't laugh. I cried. Because that's the thing about fire. It doesn't just burn, it purifies. A letter to my younger self. If I could go back to that girl in San Diego, long hair, bright eyes, dreaming of a bakery with lace curtains and the smell of cinnamon, I'd tell her this: you will love deeply, you will be betrayed cruelly, you will stand in a garage holding a tube of lubricant, wondering if your whole life was a lie, and in that moment, you will have a choice: collapse or create. Choose creation. Because your hands know the truth your heart has forgotten. You are not defined by what they took from you. You are defined by what you build in its place. Closing monologue. For the audience ideal for YouTube narration, spoken slowly, with quiet intensity. If you're watching this, if you've stayed with me through every twist, every tear, every moment of quiet rage, then I see you. Maybe you're sitting in your kitchen right now, listening on your phone while your coffee cools. Maybe you're driving, hands on the wheel, heart heavy with a secret you haven't told anyone. Maybe you're just curious, drawn in by the drama, the scandal, the superglue. But here's what I need you to know. This story isn't about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's about the moment you realize you've been living someone else's script and you tear it up. It's about gathering evidence not to destroy, but to free yourself. It's about standing in the garage at midnight, swapping lubricant for glue, not because you're cruel, but because you refuse to be erased. So wherever you are, San Diego or Sydney, Lagos or London, I want you to do something for me. Put your hand on your heart. Feel that. That's your truth. Not the lies they told you. Not the roles they assigned you. Your truth. And if that truth is screaming, this isn't right, then listen. Document. Plan. Protect your peace. You don't need superglue. You don't need a fire department. You just need to believe deep in your bones that you deserve better. And when you walk away from what's broken, build something beautiful in its place. Because the world needs your legacy, not the one they tried to steal, but the one only you can create. Final words. I still bake flan every Sunday. Daniel joins me now. We stir the caramel in silence, the way I once taught Allison. But this time, the love is real, the trust is earned, and the recipe, it's finally mine. Thank you for listening. If this story reached you, leave a comment, tell me your city, your name, or just, I'm still here. Because sometimes, the most powerful act of resistance is simply saying, I survived. And to that, I say, welcome to the legacy. Morning light. 1 year, to the day after the fire, I woke before dawn, not to the sound of sirens, but to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of sparrows nesting in the bakery's eaves. I made coffee the old way, beans ground by hand, water just shy of boiling, poured slow over a cloth filter. The ritual was the same, but everything else had changed. I no longer checked Julian's pockets. I no longer listened for lies in the silence. I no longer flinched at the word dad. Instead, I stood at the kitchen window, watching the sky shift from indigo to rose, and thought, this is mine, all of it. The bakery had become more than a business. It was a compass, a promise, a place where broken women came not just for pastries, but for proof that you could rebuild. And today, like every Tuesday, I baked flan for the Second Chance Circle, a gathering I'd started in the back room, open to any woman who'd survived betrayal, no questions asked, just sugar, eggs, and the quiet understanding that sometimes healing begins with stirring caramel. The girl in the apron. 8:15 a.m. The bell above the door chimed. She was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a nervous grip on her purse. Her name was Marisol, she told me later, and she'd driven 3 hours from El Paso after seeing a clip of my story on a Spanish-language news segment. I didn't believe it at first, she said, sitting at the counter while I poured her coffee. A woman who fought back without losing herself. I thought it was a fairy tale. I handed her a cup. It's not a fairy tale. It's a choice. She looked down, twisting the pastry in her hands. My husband, he's been lying. I found messages. He says it's nothing, but I know. I didn't offer advice. I simply pushed a notepad toward her. Write down what you saw. Dates, times, details. Not for revenge, for clarity. She blinked, surprised. That's it. That's the first step, I said. Truth doesn't need drama. It just needs to be seen. She stayed for 2 hours. We baked flan together. I taught her the trick. Let the caramel darken just past amber. That's where the depth lives. As she left, she hugged me tight, desperate. Thank you for showing us we don't have to disappear. I watched her go, then turned to Daniel, who'd been quietly boxing pastries in the back. She reminded me of me, I said. He smiled. You gave her a lifeline. No, I corrected gently. I gave her a mirror. 3. The news featured 2 weeks later. A local journalist named Lena arrived with a camera crew. We want to do a profile, she said. Not about the scandal, about this. She gestured to the bustling bakery, the women laughing over coffee, the trays of golden pastries, the chalkboard that read, Today's Special, Hope Served Warm. I agreed, but only if they didn't use the word revenge. This isn't about getting even, I told Lena as we sat in the garden behind the bakery, jasmine blooming on the trellis. It's about refusing to be erased. The segment aired on a Sunday evening. They called it The Baker Who Rose. It showed me kneading dough, teaching Marisol how to fold empanadas, laughing with Mrs. Peterson over burnt churros. At one point, Lena asked, "Do you ever regret what you did?" I looked into the camera, not with defiance, but with peace. I don't regret protecting what was mine, but I do regret believing for so long that love meant silence. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in. A woman in Chicago wrote, "I filed for divorce after watching your story. I'm opening a flower shop next month." A teacher in Miami said, "I started a support group for students whose parents are going through betrayal. We call it Juliet's Circle." I framed the letters, hung them in the hallway between the kitchen and the dining room, not as trophies but as reminders. Your truth can be someone else's lifeline. 4. The encounter then. On a rainy Thursday in October, he appeared. Julian. He stood outside the bakery, collar turned up against the drizzle, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. Older. Defeated. I saw him through the window and didn't move. Daniel noticed and stiffened. "Do you want me to know?" I said softly. "I'll handle it." I walked out, stopping just under the awning, the rain hissing on the pavement between us. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He looked down, then up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I just wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't unglue skin," I replied, "or unbreak a son's heart." He flinched. "Allison left me, moved to Florida. She won't even return my calls." "I know," I said. "Thomas still sends updates. Old habits." He swallowed hard. "I lost everything, Juliet." "You lost what you stole," I corrected, "what was never yours to keep." He nodded, tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. "I miss you." That almost broke me, not because I still loved him, but because I remembered the man I thought he was, the one who held my hand at our bakery's grand opening, the one who cried when Daniel was born. But that man was a ghost. "I don't miss you," I said gently. "I miss the idea of you, and that's enough." He turned to leave, shoulders slumped. "Julian," I called after him. He stopped. "Don't come back. Not for me. For Daniel. He's finally healing. Don't make him bleed again." He didn't answer, just walked away, disappearing into the gray afternoon. I went back inside, wiped my hands on my apron, and returned to the OVENV. The legacy continues. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch, sharing a slice of leftover flan. "He looked broken," he said quietly. "He is," I replied, "but broken things don't always deserve fixing." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then, I started seeing someone. I turned, surprised. "Oh, her name's Alina. She's a paramedic. She knows what happened, and she doesn't treat me like I'm damaged." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're not damaged, Mia. You're refined, like sugar turned to caramel." He laughed, the real kind, deep and warm. "You always did have a way with words." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets, the distant hum of the city. "Mom," he said after a while, "do you think what you did was wrong?" I thought carefully. "I think justice isn't always clean. Sometimes it's messy, glue and smoke and mustard, but if it protects the innocent, then it's sacred." He nodded. "I'm glad you're my mom, and I'm glad you're my son," I said. "Even on the hard days." Final reflections. People ask me now, "What's the secret to your flan?" They expect a trick vanilla bean, a splash of rum, a pinch of salt. But the real secret is this: you have to let the sugar burn a little to get the depth. Life is like that. You can't have resilience without rupture. You can't have clarity without confrontation. You can't have legacy without loss. I lost a husband, but I found my voice. I lost a daughter-in-law, but I gained a son who sees me truly, sees me for the first time. And the bakery, it's not just mine anymore. It belongs to every woman who walks through that door with her head down and leaves with her spine straight. Closing monologue expanded for impact. So if you're listening, whether you're in Lagos or Lisbon, Mumbai or Minneapolis, know this: you are not defined by what they tried to take from you. You are defined by what you choose to build in its place. Don't wait for permission to protect your peace. Don't apologize for gathering evidence. Don't confuse silence with strength. Real strength is standing in the garage at midnight, swapping lubricant for glue, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. It's baking flan the morning after your world burns. It's teaching your son to stir caramel while the past smolders behind you. It's looking your betrayer in the eye and saying, 40 years end here. And then walking away, not with your head down, but with your hands full of dough, ready to create something beautiful. Because the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's continuation. It's waking up. It's baking. It's loving on. your own terms, and if you do that, you've already won. Thank you for walking this path with me. Now go build your legacy.